The most influential military text in human history might have been written by a man who never existed. For over 2,000 years, generals, emperors, and now Silicon Valley executives have quoted Sun Tzu as if he were a settled historical fact, a brilliant general who won impossible battles and wrote down his secrets. But scholars have been quietly arguing about whether Sun Tzu was ever a real person at all. And the answer to that mystery says something surprising about why the book still works today. This is The Art of War, explained properly, with the real story behind it, not just the quotes people put on LinkedIn. Here's the problem historians ran into. The Zhuojuan, an extremely detailed historical record of exactly the era Sun Tzu supposedly lived in, mentions nearly every notable military and political figure of the time. It does not mention Sun Tzu once, not a single line. For a supposed legendary general credited with a career-defining victory at the Battle of Boju, that's an enormous silence. Some scholars think Sun Tzu isn't even a real name, it's a title, meaning roughly Master Sun, which raises the odd possibility that The Art of War wasn't written by one brilliant general at all, but assembled over generations, a collection of hard-earned battlefield wisdom from multiple unnamed strategists, eventually credited to a single legendary figure the way folktales get credited to one storyteller. Then in 1972, construction workers near Linyi in Shandong province accidentally broke into two sealed tombs from the Han Dynasty, sealed for over 2,000 years. Inside were bundles of bamboo strips, and among them, two separate military texts. One matched the art of war we know today. The other was attributed to a different figure entirely, Sun Bin, a supposed descendant of the original Sun Tzu, with his own separate treatise on war that had been lost for 2 millennia. The discovery didn't settle the debate about whether Sun Tzu existed. If anything, it deepened it, showing that there were at least 2 Master Sun traditions tangled together for centuries. There's one story about Sun Tzu that everyone repeats, whether or not it actually happened. The king of Wu wanted to test whether Sun Tzu's military theories were real or just clever writing, so he handed Sun Tzu an unusual army, 180 of the king's own palace concubines, and told him to turn them into soldiers. Sun Tzu divided them into 2 companies, put the king's 2 favorite concubines in command of each, and gave the order to turn right. The women laughed. He repeated the order. They laughed again. So Sun Tzu had the 2 commanding concubines executed on the spot, in front of the king, and appointed new leaders. From that moment forward, every order was carried out in total silence and total precision. Most historians now believe this story is invented, first questioned as early as the 11th century by Chinese scholars who noticed it doesn't appear anywhere in earlier, more reliable records. But the story has survived for a reason. It captures something Sun Tzu's actual writing keeps returning to. That discipline and clarity of command matter more than the size or willingness of your fort. Whether or not it happened, it's the story the book earned by being right about everything else. So what does the book actually say, once you strip away the legend? The most quoted line, and the most misunderstood, is this: the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. People treat this as a nice philosophical sentiment. It's not. It's a brutally practical argument about trust. Sun Tzu lived through what historians now understand as roughly 1,000 years of near-constant warfare between competing Chinese states. He'd seen exactly what a one war costs even the winner, in food, in soldiers, in years. His entire framework is built around the idea that fighting is the most expensive, least efficient way to win, and that a good strategist wins the war before a single sword is drawn, through positioning, information, and forcing the enemy into an impossible position. That's why nearly half the text isn't about combat tactics at all. It's about intelligence. Sun Tzu argued that knowing your enemy's plans in advance, through spies, informants, and careful observation, was worth more than any weapon or army size. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles, he wrote. Most people quote the first half of that line and forget the second. Knowing yourself, your own weaknesses, your own blind spots, is treated as equally critical, and far harder. The book also makes an argument that sounds almost contradictory. All warfare is based on dissection. Appear weak when you are strong. Appear far away when you are near. Sun Tzu wasn't advocating dishonesty for its own sake. He was arguing that an enemy who misjudges your position and capability will make decisions that hand you the advantage before the fighting even starts. The art of war stayed almost entirely unknown outside East Asia for roughly 2,000 years. It wasn't translated into a Western language until 1772. When a French Jesuit missionary living in China brought a translation back to Europe. There's a persistent, though unverified claim that Napoleon read a French edition of the text. Verified or not, the book's influence exploded in the 20th century for real. It shaped Mao Zedong's guerrilla strategy during the Chinese Civil War. It was studied by North Vietnamese commanders during the Vietnam War, and by the 1980s, it had crossed entirely into Western business and pop culture. Most famously quoted by Gordon Gekko in the 1987 film Wall Street as the guiding philosophy of ruthless corporate trading. That crossover, from ancient battlefield strategy to boardroom philosophy, is exactly why this book still sells millions of copies a year, 25 centuries after it was written, or compiled, or both. It's not really a book about war. It's a book about asymmetric advantage, about winning through information and positioning rather than brute force. And that idea turned out to translate to nearly every competitive arena humans have invented since. Next time in this series, we go deeper into the single idea that runs through nearly every chapter of this book: deception, and why Sun Tzu believed the strongest position is the one your opponent doesn't know you're in. If you want to understand how the same principles show up 500 years later in Renaissance Italy, that's where Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power picks up the thread, and we'll be covering that next as well. Subscribe if you want to follow both threads as they unfold.